a été frappé par un terrible tremblement de terre. Le peuple haïtien continue d'être résilient et de se battre pour un meilleur avenir, et le Canada va continuer d'être à leur côté. On est très heureux aujourd'hui d'accueillir le Premier ministre du Japon, Fumio Kishida, ici à Ottawa aujourd'hui. Le Japon est un partenaire, un allié et un ami du Canada. C'est un plaisir de travailler ensemble pour faire avancer certaines de nos priorités communes, comme la croissance économique et la création de bons emplois pour la classe moyenne, et la paix et la sécurité dans la région du Pacifique et à travers le monde. Trade and economic relations between Canada and Japan continue to expand. As of October, exports to Japan were up 27%, and imports from Japan were up 11%. Prime Minister Kishida and I are both committed to continue to deepen our economic relationship. That's why Canada will be organizing a Team Canada trade mission to Japan in October 2023. The goals are to expand trade, strengthen our supply chains, and build a sustainable future. These are key elements of Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy. The trade mission will focus on economic security areas such as energy, food, critical minerals, and advanced technologies. Japan is the third largest economy in the world. For example, if you're a small business owner in the technology industry in Toronto or a pork producer in Saskatchewan or in Quebec, more trade with Japan means the ability to sell more of your products and services. It means you can hire more workers and raise their salaries. More trade also means opening our doors to Japanese companies who want to establish a presence here and hire Canadian talent. That's what growing our trading relationships and diversifying our markets is all about. This spring, we're also looking forward to hosting an important business delegation from Japan. They're planning to be meeting with Canadian battery and mining companies and potential partners. Canada, of course, has a lot to offer. We're a reliable and stable partner. We have critical and valuable resources, and we have a skilled, educated, and ambitious workforce. We have everything needed to drive the solutions a net zero world will need. Le Premier ministre Kishida et moi, on a aussi discuté des enjeux de sécurité dans la région et ailleurs dans le monde. On va continuer de soutenir l'Ukraine contre l'invasion brutale de la Russie, et je veux remercier le Japon pour son leadership à ce sujet. Et on va continuer de promouvoir et de protéger l'ordre international fondé sur les règles. A free and open Indo-Pacific region based on the rule of law, this is how we ensure security and stability for our countries. And this is how we can ensure prosperity and good jobs for our people. The world is a tough place right now, but it's good to know that we can count on our good and true friends to get through this together. Your leadership as President of the G7 will be extremely important this year as we continue our work on global security and on what we must be doing together to build a sustainable and resilient future, not just in our countries as a G7, but around the world, particularly in the global South. I'm looking forward to doing this work with you, Fumio-san, and especially now that we have a renewed focus on the Indo-Pacific. You can always count on Canada when it comes to defending our shared values and building a better future for our people. Thank you, my dear friend, for your visit. J'ai bien hâte de continuer notre travail ensemble à votre sommet du G7 au mois de mai prochain. With that, I'm happy to pass it over to my friend and Canada's friend, Fumio-san.
トルドー首相、そしてカナダ国民の皆様、新年のお祝いの余韻も残るこのタイミングで温かくお迎えいただき、深く感謝を申し上げます。
I am delighted to be visiting Canada for the first time in 7 years, and for the first time as a Prime Minister since my visit as a foreign minister. My first visit, or the 7 years ago in 2016, I made my visit, and that was in February. And the stark contrast between the bitter cold temperature of Ottawa and the warmth of the hospitality of the Canadian people was very impressive, and this time is no different. Thank you very much indeed. The relationship between Japan and Canada has deepened significantly in recent years. Both countries are important strategic partners in the Indo-Pacific region, sharing universal values such as freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. As the international order is exposed to various challenges and the security environment becomes increasingly tougher, we will strengthen our cooperation with Canada to maintain and strengthen peace and stability in the international community and the Indo-Pacific region. At the summit meeting today, I explained the new national security strategy, which includes a decision on the fundamental strengthening of defense capabilities and an increase in the budget. Prime Minister Trudeau once again gave his full support. In addition, we discussed the Indo-Pacific strategy, which Canada announced in November of last year. It is in line with the Japan-Canada Action Plan for contributing to a free and open Indo-Pacific FOIP, released in October last year, which outlines concrete actions by Canada and Japan to realize the FOIP. We welcome Canada's increased engagement in the Indo-Pacific region as a Pacific state. The two countries will work together towards the realization of the FOIP through the steady implementation of the action plan. Furthermore, we agreed that with regard to Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the G7 would remain united and continue to implement tough sanctions and strong support for Ukraine. We are also seriously concerned about Russia's nuclear threats, which we confirm to be absolutely unacceptable, not to mention the use of nuclear weapons, which must never happen. We shared serious concerns about North Korea's increasing nuclear and missile activities. We confirm that we will continue to work closely together towards the complete denuclearization of North Korea in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions. From this perspective, we highly appreciated Canada's surveillance and monitoring of ship-to-ship transfers, and we also affirmed that we would continue to work together in dealing with the abduction issue.
的な現状変更の試みに強く反対する。
To strongly oppose attempts to unilaterally change the status quo by force in the East and South China Seas, and confirmed that Japan and Canada should continue to work closely together in dealing with the issues in the region. In the area of economy, we agreed to strengthen cooperation in economic areas including energy and food, including LNG Canada and critical mineral resources, and in economic security, including supply chain resilience and responses to economic coercion, as well as in addressing untransparent and unfair development finance. During the meeting, we had a frank discussion also on CPTPP and agreed to continue to work closely together while confirming the importance of maintaining the high standards of the agreement. At the meeting, I also explained my views as the G7 chair on the G7 Hiroshima summit to take place this May. And we confirmed that we will work closely together for the success of the summit. The G7 Hiroshima summit will demonstrate the vision and determination of the G7 nations to firmly reject any attempt to unilaterally change the status quo through force or the threat or use of nuclear weapons, and to uphold an international order based on the rule of law. Furthermore, with Prime Minister Trudeau, we agreed that it is important for the G7 to work together in the areas of global economy, including energy and food security, nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation, economic security, and global issues such as climate change, health, and development. Many things have changed over the last 7 years, but many things remain unchanged as well. I'm confident that the universal values that Canada and Japan share and the significance of cooperation between the two countries in various fields will remain unchanged. This visit was extremely meaningful. I'd like to thank you very much for that. I look forward to welcoming Justin to Hiroshima in May this year.
There will now be time for questions from media. Va avoir maintenant du temps des questions des médias.
We'll now have time for questions from the media.
From the Japanese media delegation and 2 questions from Canadian media, starting with the first question from Japan.
Please go ahead with your questions. Sankei Shimbun, Tamura speaking. I'd like to direct this question to the 2 prime ministers on China. Japan's national security strategy positioned China as the greatest strategic challenge. And in Canada, you have announced a strategy where you will try to restore order, international order. And the Xi Jinping government, for unifying with Taiwan, said that it would not stop at using weapons. And so would you please indicate your recognition of the present status? And what kind of exchanges took place with regard to China, please? Then let me respond first. On China, for Japan and Canada, China is a central challenge. That is my awareness.
Between Japan and China, there are many pending issues. And at the same time, both countries, Japan and China, both share important responsibilities for the peace and stability of the region.
For Japan and China to create a constructive and stable relationship would be indispensable for peace and stability of the international community, which includes India, the Indo-Pacific, rather. And at the talks today with Prime Minister Trudeau, we agreed that we would strongly oppose unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force in the Eastern China Sea and the South China Sea. And with regard to various issues regarding China, that we would closely liaise and coordinate. And that was the nature of the discussion that took place.
How important the G7 is in coordinating a strong response to defend the international rules-based order, either through direct security engagements, as we're sending, for example, supplies and armaments to Ukraine to resist against the illegal invasion by Russia, or to better coordinate on how we stand up for the international rules-based order diplomatically, in terms of following economic principles, and really bringing forward a level of coordination. With Fumio-san's hosting of the G7 in Japan, the focus will rightly be on the Indo-Pacific in this new world with a rise of increasingly contesting authoritarian powers, whether it be Russia on the one hand or China, which Canada has recently recognized in our Indo-Pacific strategy as an increasingly disruptive global power. I think the focus that we had in our extensive conversations, and indeed the conversations we've been having over the past year and more amongst G7 partners, has been on recognizing there are areas where we are going to have to cooperate and work together with China. A great example of that is the Nature COP, the COP15 that Canada just hosted in Montreal. We co-hosted it with China, and between China and Canada working together, we were able to get an extremely ambitious agreement signed by almost all the countries in the world to protect 30% of our land and 30% of our waters by 2030. So there are areas which we need to work with China. But there are other areas in which we're going to have to compete with China, and other areas in which we're going to have to directly contest China, whether it's on human rights, whether it's on respect for international rules and the rules-based order. And that approach, which is thoughtful, aligned, coordinated, and responsible, focused on creating opportunities for people in our countries and around the world, is going to continue in our approach on China.
And next question to Ryan Tulty, National Post.
Yeah, I guess for both Prime Ministers. Prime Minister Kishida, you came here looking, I'm sure, for commitments from Canada for more LNG export. I know it is central to the expansion of your economy. I'm wondering, Prime Minister Trudeau, what commitments you made to the Japanese in regards to that, and whether or not you're looking at easing regulatory hurdles, so a project like the Phase 2 expansion of LNG Canada can get approved and start shipping natural gas.
Obviously, we talked a lot about how Canada can be a reliable supplier, not just of energy, but of critical minerals, of commodities and resources, including agricultural resources, that the world is going to need as we move towards a net zero economy around the world. We're very excited about the LNG Canada project, which was the largest private investment in Canada, a project led by Shell on the West Coast, in which a Japanese company, Mitsubishi, is a significant partner, because we know that being a reliable supplier of energy is important. And we're going to continue to look for ways to be that reliable supplier of energy. But even as we do talk about things like LNG and other traditional sources of energy, we know the world is moving aggressively and meaningfully towards decarbonizing, towards diversifying, towards more renewables. And that's where the agreements that we've already seen to develop between Japanese and Canadian companies on hydrogen, on ammonia, on various new technologies are really exciting. As I mentioned, there's going to be a number of Japanese CEOs coming to Canada in the coming months from the Battery Association, an industry association around batteries in Japan, very interested in becoming part of our battery supply chain, which was recently recognized as the second most important in the world. We're also going to be going to Japan with a trade mission in the fall that will continue to deepen those things. So there's a lot of conversations we've had, and Canada is going to continue to make sure we're doing what creates good jobs in Canada and more sustainable, reliable futures for people around the world, and providing energy in all sorts of different ways in a way that helps us all build a strong future. Okay. La réalité, c'est que nous allons continuer.
The reality is that we will continue to work together to respond and to meet the energy needs of our partners throughout the world, whether that's through the LNG Canada project on the West Coast. And in this project, we have a Japanese company that is a significant investor, and whether it's hydrogen projects or other technologies and renewables, we will be there to work together. We need to ensure that this transition towards lower carbon emission fuels create good jobs for Canadian workers, but also help to create solutions that the whole world needs, and those are discussions that we will continue to hold together.
はい、まず
Well, last year, there was aggression by Russia into Ukraine, and since then, the world is facing an energy crisis. Under such a situation, the major countries each are trying to have a stable supply of energy and also to decarbonize. Countries must fulfill these two objectives. So, considering the current global energy situation, Canada, which is a country abundant in resources, will further increase its presence. That is my impression. And Japan, in terms of our relations with Canada, we also want to have a closer relationship with Canada in the area of energy. And under such a situation, LNG or LNG Canada business and other cooperations between Japan and Canada should develop. I welcome such developments. So your question also included some commitment about regulations, but we didn't make any concrete commitment. But in any event, business between Japan and Canada is important, and to develop an environment which will promote business between the two countries, the Japanese government will try to cooperate in developing such an environment. That is all. Thank you.
Yeah, the Japanese government has recently increased its defense spending, doubling basically its defense spending to respond to China. Prime Minister Trudeau, I'm wondering what you make of that development. And for Prime Minister Kishida, I'm wondering if you could tell us why you felt that was necessary.
First of all, we're all recognizing that the world is changing. The world changed when Russia chose to invade a peaceful neighbor. And we understand the persistent threats caused by unstable or authoritarian states around the world. And that's going to require us, unfortunately, to continue to step up. And Canada has been there with significant investments in our armed forces, significant new equipment, including 88 fighter jets that we just announced a couple of days ago, that will mean we recognize that part of creating prosperity and peace for our citizens means investing in the security architecture that is going to be unfortunately important in the coming years. But a key part of that is ensuring that even as we each do our part, we are coordinating and aligning our efforts, which is why Canada welcomes so strongly the new national security strategy that Prime Minister Kishida just put forward. And we will continue to work with our partners at the G7 and around the world as we move forward on keeping people safe. Nous reconnaissons que le monde a changé.
We recognize that the world changed since the illegal invasion by Russia of Ukraine and other incidents and events. We recognize that we need to do more to protect Canadians and to ensure the stability, the peace, and the prosperity of the world. That's why we are welcoming the announcement of the new national security strategy of Japan. We continue to invest in the equipment and capacity of the Canadian forces, whether that's through the fighter jets, modernization of NORAD, and so on. We will continue to make the necessary investments.
About the fundamental strengthening of Japan's defense capability, why it is necessary to do so, I think, was the question. With the Russians' aggression into Ukraine, such a unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force is something that should never happen anywhere, including in Asia. But on the other hand, the situation in Asia, looking at the environment surrounding Japan, last year, North Korea, for more than 30 times, they launched the ballistic missile, and more than 50 ballistic missiles in total was launched in Asia by North Korea. And ballistic missiles, some of them crossed over Japanese territories. And the East China Sea or South China Sea, unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force is actually happening. Within such tough changes in the security environment, the lives of Japanese people and the businesses, can we really protect them? I spent 1 year last year to discuss about this point. To give you the conclusion, the content of a defense capability we thought should be strengthened, and the scale of the budget should also aim at a level of around 2% of a GDP. So we conducted a shift in the policy. Of course, to maintain peace and prosperity in the region, strong diplomacy is also necessary. That is the basics. But to support the strong diplomatic activities, it is very important to have a strong defense capability. So, under such a very severe security environment, to promote a strong diplomacy and also to enhance Japan's deterrence and response capability, a fundamental strengthening of defense capability was considered. I hope Canada, G7 countries, and the surrounding countries in Asia, I have to explain this carefully to these countries to protect the lives of Japanese people. Japan is taking this policy. So I want to continue with a very careful explanation about it. That is all. Thank you.
Japanese media delegation.
Murayama Kyodo Press.
I have a question to Mr. Kishida. You visited France and you discussed about 2+2 with France to be held around the first half of this year. You talked about you signed the RAA with UK. But with Canada, are there any plans to establish a new framework of cooperation with Canada or upgrade the existing framework in any concrete measures? First, Japan and Canada are members of G7 and are important strategic partners of the Indo-Pacific region, sharing the universal value of freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Both countries in October last year announced the Canada-Japan Action Plan for the realization of free and open Indo-Pacific. With this backdrop, in the area of security, concrete cooperation is proceeding in such areas like cooperation in joint exercise, expansion of defense exchange, or negotiation on the agreement on the security information between Japan and Canada, and also including Canada's vigilance and surveillance activities on ship-to-ship transfer, and also response to missile and nuclear developments of North Korea. We are proceeding with such cooperation. So through steady implementation of this action plan, I have agreed with Prime Minister Trudeau to further strengthen bilateral relationship. So based on the action plan in the area of security, I want to further proceed with the cooperation going forward. To realize FOIP, various types of cooperation should be further deepened. Thank you.
And last question, Madeleine Desmarais, Radio-Canada.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Kishida. Welcome to Canada. My question will be to Prime Minister Trudeau. Monsieur Trudeau, si vous pouvez répondre en français et en anglais, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Trudeau, if you can answer in French and in English, please. About the travelers and charter, the opposition is saying that there are some gaps. Do you recognize that there could be a system that could and that does protect travelers more in Europe and in the US? Do you intend to improve the charter, and how? We were very pleased a few years to implement the Travelers Protection Charter, but we recognize that things have been very difficult over the past year for travelers, and there are even larger challenges that have come up. For example, we saw it over the holidays. So I can assure you that, yes, we are looking at strengthening and improving and to make even more relevant the protections for travelers under the Charter. So yes, we are looking at what more to do.
We were very pleased to introduce Canada's first ever protection, a Bill of Rights for air travel passengers a couple of years ago. We also recognize that the past couple of years has been an unprecedented time of disruption and challenges in terms of particularly air travel. This past year, including just this past holiday season, presented some real new challenges, unfortunately, for families. And we are absolutely going to make sure that the Bill of Rights for air passengers is strengthened and expanded to make sure that we're continuing to make sure that Canadian travelers are protected.
Sur les transferts en santé maintenant, on a entendu.
On health transfers now, we heard Premiers Ford and others amp up the pressure over the past few days and weeks. Do you have the impression that we're getting closer to an agreement? And in terms of the levels of the transfers, have there been improvements? And when will there be a Prime Minister and Premiers, First Ministers meeting? First, we know that people across this country and families across this country want to see concrete improvements in health services delivery. The Canadian government is there to work with the provinces to ensure that we do provide the best services, whether it's better access to family doctors, rapid access to various mental and other health services, whether it's eliminating backlogs for important treatments. So as I've said many times, we have and we continue to have very good discussions with the premiers. We are there to invest more money in the health care system to ensure that we get real results. I had good discussions very recently with Premiers Ford and Legault, among others, and I'm looking forward to be able to finish this work so that we can deliver more, but there is still work to be done on certain issues, for example, the parameters for the investments and the amounts of money.
We know the Canadians need access to better healthcare services across the country. The pandemic has put stress on our system, on human resources and on physical resources. That's why the federal government is committed to delivering more support for healthcare systems across the country, more financial support, but to do it in such a way that really delivers ensures that Canadians see better outcomes from our healthcare system, something that the provinces all agree on as well. Whether it's better access to family doctors for more Canadians, whether it's shorter wait times for accessing mental health services, or just reducing the backlog for important surgeries. There's a lot that we can and will be doing together. I've had some very constructive conversations with premiers, including Premier Ford and Premier Legault. Our ministers and their counterparts are working very closely, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to come to an agreement soon. We know that Canadians deserve better healthcare services, and the federal government will be there to support.
Thank you. That concludes today's press conference. Merci. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Thank you. This concludes today's press conference.